right, what's going on? So clearly, this is a later time that I normally start, but there's a lot of things going on. My days are full, so whether I get a lot of people here or not, everybody knows how this works. If you catch it now, good. If not, there's always the replay game. All right, so welcome to a Value Conversation Gen X Spoken Word. So tonight's topic, Black culture's three detriments. See if I can put this music down a little bit more. So over the last couple of weeks, we have seen everything come to a head here, especially with the Voting Rights Act being fully eviscerated right now. So the thing that's been of a concern to me is that with all this that is happening around us, why isn't it that I see Black, or why is it not that I see Black content creators focusing more on that? And it's always the same three things that I happen to see. We're either talking about how a fat guy doesn't deserve any punani, or how a man has to be a leader, how the lady has to decide on whether or not she is going to get with a man with resources or just be by herself. And if it's not that, we're talking about FBA. We are indigenous to North America. Blacks have always been here. And then my biggest irritation is how Christianity is still one of our primary detriments to the Black community, not giving any thought to what it has done to us as a culture. Now, before I go any further, one of the things that I've said before that I have got to ensure that I do before any show is to make sure people put up their circle. Just a moment. Now, when I say put up their circle, I'm talking about the Dr. Ray Hagan circle that allows people to get a broad view and an understanding of where their limitations and what they believe and accept exist. By doing so, it means that we can at least try to level set the conversation before we get started, because I have no doubt there's going to be some things that I say that people will not agree with. There may be some things that people in the chat may say that I may not agree with, but at least I've got to look at it from a perspective that if it is something that I'm unfamiliar with, I need to at least give it a fair shot, take a look and see what it is that I like or dislike, or whether it's something that is correct, incorrect, fact, or fiction. But nonetheless, let's put it out there first and foremost, and then make the assessment rather than say you're lying. So that being said, inside this circle, all right, so put it up here, anyone in the replay game or anyone watching right now, inside this circle lies my anecdotal, lived experiences and exposures that I base my life on. Just because John says something I do not agree with does not make me an idiot or John a liar. It just means it is something being discussed I am unfamiliar with. So anytime you feel yourself getting into that zone to whereas, hey, wait a minute, I'm not really feeling with this, I think this is a lie, put your circle up, give it a moment to think things through, and then from there, we'll go on, all right? But I need you to understand here that there's going to be some things I may or may not say that may get to you. And it's not that I'm doing it on purpose to give you any type of grief, but it is to allow you to look at life from a perspective that you may not have considered if you don't normally hear this type of conversation on a day-to-day basis. By no means do I have the answer to everything or anything, but I'm sure that I have read and looked at a few things that you may not consider. And if that is the case, just allow this to marinate a little bit, all right? Oh, let me give the obligatory. Find somebody who knows somebody to tell somebody about what we've got going on over here. If you like it, let me know. Share it if you do. And subscribe if this is something you're looking for. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. So what I am going to do We'll let the music run here for a second. I'm not going to share the whole screen. So let's do this. We're not going to share any audio. We'll keep everything in the background. So by all means, let me know if there's any type of feedback going on. Granted, there's only one person here, but still, if you happen to know something, say something. Otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and go with it, all right? All right, so the first detriment that has been around and hanging with us as Black folks for ages here has been Christianity. Now, I've got a lot of family members who swear by the blood of Jesus. Aunts, uncles, mothers, fathers, brothers, if anything, extended family. Now, I might be the only one that openly says Jesus is not real. There's never been a God that has existed, and that draws a lot of looks, believe it or not. I get that from a lot of people, but I'm okay with that. The minute I realized there was no power in the water, there was not going to be any presence of Gabriel and his chariot shooting across the sky, blowing his horn, letting everyone know that judgment day had come. But I finally realized that none of this was real per se, and that it was nothing more than fiction. I began to realize that I had a lot of life that I need to catch up on at the ripe old age of 25, right? So let's go ahead and just get into this. What a lot of Blacks do not realize is that the Roman Catholic Church enslaved us. Now, it may sound crazy to some folks, but it's a fact. When I say this, people look at me sideways. Oh no, see, now you lying. So you're just saying something that somebody told you. No, it wasn't just the thing of somebody told me, which is what Christians seem to do every Sunday. Correct me if I'm wrong. Having somebody tell them about hellfire or brimstone or burning bushes, things that no one has ever seen, but they will take literally and take it to heart and believe it. I myself, okay, I've heard what you've said, but I don't accept that because some things just don't make any sense. It doesn't add up. Noah's Ark, Jesus dying, a biological death. We all know that when people die, you're dead. And especially from biological death, you don't come back from that. But yet this guy got up 3 days later and gave a TED talk in Galilee. Absolutely not. But let me just stay focused here because we can go off on a side around on that, but let's not do that right now. We'll reserve that for yet another show. So, getting back to it, it was the Roman Catholic Church that put us in chains. Yes, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bulls, Dum Diversus, and Romanus Pontifex, 1455, that authorized the King of Portugal to subjugate non-Christians, facilitating the enslavement of Africans and the seizure of their lands. These decrees granted rights to invade, capture, and reduce Saracens and pagans to perpetual slavery. Now, of course, the Spanish were also given the go-ahead to do so. Many Blacks seem to misunderstand the fact that the slave trade did not go directly from Africa through to America. Didn't even happen like that. Now, I've mentioned in other shows, slavery started with the Arabs enslaving us, sending Blacks all the way to the Arabian Peninsula. That's why when you look at India, any of these other places, Kuwait, anything in the Middle East, and you see someone with your shade of brown, but with that good hair, this is because of slavery. So Blacks have been trafficked from Africa since the 7th century, but there's a fair amount of people who do not know this. So let me break that off to you if you're just hearing this for the first time. All right, so what were aspects of the 1455 decree? Sanctioned slavery. The bulls provided moral and legal justification for Portugal to enslave West Africans, accelerating the transatlantic slave trade. But again, we did not go directly to America. Now, believe it or not, you had Africans go from Africa to the Arabian Peninsula. Then you had Africans that were traded from Africa who went to Iberia, which at the time was known back in the 7th century as, well, Iberia, but it was not known until later, excuse me, as Portugal and Spain. So when you hear stories about how the Muslims conquered Iberia, it was not Muslims per se, pure Muslims from Arabia. It was more along the lines of Africans who had been converted to Islam, who were actually the ones who conquered Iberia, known today as Spain and Portugal. Land seizure. The Pope authorized the seizure of non-Christian lands, property, and goods, framing the conquest as a religious duty. Now, Dr. John Henry Clark would always say that when the spirituality was taken from Africa, turned around and given back to us as Christianity, the Europeans, as he stated many a time during his lectures during his life, had made God ungodly. Many times I recall during some of his lectures where he would state that if God were to show his face, God would be a bigot. And if we look at where the situation is nowadays, I can't say that the man would be wrong. Specifically looking at certain aspects of society now, how slavery and scientific racism going back to the 18th and 19th century has depicted people of color. And anything that is done outside of that to say that, no, this is not an accurate representation, people will still try and lean back on these falsehoods and the justifications that were put in place to subjugate the prominence that actually was shown throughout African history. But all of that is not going to be revealed per se in this particular show. If need be, I'll probably have to drop links from a previous show, or just make sure at the end of this video, once I'm finished putting it all together, and when I go back and do some editing, I'll make sure to make the end screen, in the last minute and a half or so of the video, make the end screen, I'll populate the end screen with some of the previous videos that I've done that will allow you to hear some of the information that I'm talking about. So rest assured that information is going to be shared. All right, so religious justification. The actions were framed as an effort to convert infidels to Catholicism, sometimes described by the church at the time as a beneficial charitable act. Now, when we see these folks coming, the emissaries, or pretty much the folks that would actually go out into the backwoods or the jungles to convert people over, they're going with a purpose. Now, Dr. Ray Hagins would say that in the Evangelical Teacher Training Association, an association that he belonged to during his 25 years of, as he said, preaching the word, which he no longer does. He said the primary thing that had to be done in order to get people found, or AKA saved, you first had to get them lost. So there's a good story that he told about the Panari Indians, which was a tribe in South America who knew nothing about Jesus, God, or anything along those lines. They had their own traditions. This is around 1974, maybe 75, somewhere in the mid-70s. Long story short, when they tried, and they being the missionaries, tried the typical thing of, oh, it's because of you. You were born a sinner. You were born in sin. Because of that sin, Jesus Christ had to be sacrificed. The Indians looked at each other like, who's Jesus? What's sacrifice? What's crucifixion? These were words and things that were not part of the vocabulary. So do you know that the Roman Catholic Church created an entire Bible just for these folks to try and convert them to Catholicism? If I remember correctly, they stripped out Genesis, Acts. They just tore the whole book down and made it something basic that they can understand. To which, when they came back, they would tell the Plenary, "It is your fault that this man died. He died for you. Now you are going to burn in the big fire." They understood what big fire meant. What? No, we don't want to die in big fire. What do we have to do? We don't want to die. They rounded up themselves some Plenary Indians. I think it was called the Plenary Bible. If you look it up, you may be able to still find that somewhere on the internet. Again, these are things that you do not hear because it detracts away from the mission, which is to convert as many people as possible. And again, in order to get you saved, they had to get you lost. Give that some thought. Now, again, there's more information to go with this, but we've got two other topics that I want to get to. And yeah, it's already a little bit late past my bedtime, but let's go ahead and get this thing done, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next. If I can do this whole screen. Yeah, all right. Just a second. Wrong screen. So moving along, we're going to go ahead and stay with the topic here. I've got a couple more slides that I want to present. And we should be able to do this all maybe within the hour or so. If not, we'll go a little bit over. So I also let people know, whether they believe it or not, that the clergy profited from slavery. Now, remember, these are the same folks talking about, oh, the Lord shall bless your soul. Oh, you will sit on his right hand of God, da, 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 and so forth. Now, I try to tell people this, but again, I am probably not the messenger for that, being that I am an atheist and I do not believe in formalized religion. I believe in no religion. If anyone forced me to say I had a belief, I would say I believe in the human condition and what we make possible through our own actions. But of course, that doesn't satisfy the majority of folks who have some type of religion that they adhere to. So it ends up being a conversation that goes extremely bad, or we just don't have it all. So generally speaking here, we just don't have this conversation. But I tell people that the clergy made money. All right, they kept their institutions open worldwide through the proliferation of slavery, making trades to keep institutions open, selling slaves if they needed to for financial gain. But here, let's go through this. So I typed in the clergy profited off of slavery to continue to finance and run religious institutions worldwide. Historical records confirm that various religious institutions and their clergy directly profited from the Atlantic slave trade and enslaved labor to finance operations, build major landmarks, and rescue themselves from debt. I tell people all the time, slavery was a business. And if you were to call slavery a business, then of course Jesus was the CEO. But when I use CEO, I use it to say that Jesus was the captor, he was the enslaver, and he was the oppressor. So that's where I look at the acronym CEO if I were to apply it to Jesus, because the whole plight of the Bible, it was not to convince Africans, or should I say the enslaved, that they were going to get out of slavery, that they were going to be made whole, that they were going to be made free. It was to get them to accept the lot in life that had been enforced upon them through murder, malice, and the sharp and distinct tongue of a bullwhip. The Bible was never there to give comfort in possible freedom. It was there to aid them, to give comfort that this is your life and your lot, accept it. The Catholic Church, all right, so for over a century, the church in the United States financed its expansion and many of its foundational institutions with profits from the purchase and sale of enslaved people. Now, it threw me back when I found out that Georgetown was one of many institutions that utilized slavery in order to keep their doors open. Georgetown University in 1838, the Jesuits sold 272 enslaved people to save the institution from bankruptcy and stabilize the order in Maryland. Infrastructure. Profits from enslaved labor and sales funded the first United States archdiocese, cathedral, and seminary. All right, the Church of England. The church's historic assets were significantly bolstered by the Queen Anne's bounty, a fund established in 1704 that invested heavily in the South Sea Company, which transported tens of thousands of enslaved people. Now, do you see how deep this gets? Do you see how far this goes? But ask yourself, have you ever heard this? Ask anyone around you. Have they ever heard this information? Now, it's not like it's hidden from anyone, but if you're not in a circle of people who do a lot of reading or who have an interest in such aspects of slavery, then you would never hear this. A lot of people would go through life believing that the slave trade went from Africa straight to America. No one would know that the slave trade started very, very early from Africa to the Arabian Peninsula, from Africa to Iberia, aka Spain and Portugal. Then, of course, what people also fail to understand is that when Christopher Columbus sailed to the New World, he never made it to America, right? Never made it there. But when he landed in Haiti, Jamaica, in those areas, in those islands, when he landed there, he came across the Tano Indians. And for 10 years, they raped, pillaged, plundered, I'm going to use the word murdered, all right? They killed about 80% of that population. They almost wiped them out. It was, as was called by the definition, genocide. So when they ran out of the labor that they had enforced upon that particular region, do you know what they did? Well, they started taking some of the Tano Indians back to Spain to use as slaves, plus to show that, okay, these people know where there's a great treasure. It has to be there. But in the interim, here, let's bring them back over to be slaves. But when it got sparse, because they had all but died out because of physical violence, because of disease, starvation, whatever, that is when Spain took the Africans that they had taken from Africa to Spain. They put them on boats and took them from Spain and shipped them down to the New World. That is how the first Africans came into the Western Hemisphere. They were already slaves in Spain after being taken from Africa. But because the Tano Indians had all but been wiped out and labor was still needed for those new Spanish colonies, they sailed Africans from Spain over to the New World. That's how we got there, at least where we started, I should say. But I digress. The whole thing I want to say here is that even in those sails, right, when the Africans got to the New World at the time, there were still clergy waiting there to receive their property. And at that time, I believe it's like maybe 20 cents a head. Now imagine if you have a ship of over 500 Africans, 20 cents a head, and you've got boats showing up every other month, every couple of months, but nonetheless, still, that back then is a lot of money. So again, if you want to see this information, just go ahead and type in what I put inside of my search bar. Now, what ties this all together and makes this so nefarious? Well, I've done, actually, I don't think I've done a full show yet, but I need to. I think on TikTok, I released a video about 7 or 8 months ago that was called the 7 Mountains Mandate. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Seven Mountains Mandate is, this is an ideology, a Christian nationalist, extremist ideology that is being pushed to take dominion over the earth, but primarily in the United States, where they believe they can bring the fictional character Jesus Christ back. But here's the thing, he never was here. But again, different show, that's the ideology. The Seven Mountain Mandate, also known as 7M or Seven Mountains Dominionism, is a conservative Christian dominionist ideology that holds that believers are called to dominate 7 key spheres of societal influence to establish Christian control and prepare for the second coming of Jesus Christ. How wild is that? But you have people who truly believe this, a fictional character that never existed, but yet the control, that is real. That part is real. So the 7 areas, family, religion, education, government, media, arts and entertainment, and business. Now I have an acronym that I normally speak to folks to help them memorize them. So my acronym starts out with extorting gods must always remove facts, brothers. So we begin with education, or better yet, let me do this. I'll do this instead. There you go. Instead of me putting this into a separate form, I'm just going to throw this up here. That's in my email. So if you could bear with me. All right, so I've got it broken out to where, as you see, education. All right, controlling what is taught in schools, supporting homeschooling, and promoting Christian schools. Has anyone ever heard of, not Prather, PragerU? There we go. PragerU. It is a non-accredited school, but that is a university that does a lot of work pushing the Seven Mountains Mandate. Now they're active with MAGA as well. So I'm going to try and give a few examples here and there, and in a later show, I'll be a little bit more in depth. Government, installing leaders who hold Christian nationalist views to shape legislation. Pete Hegseth, Mike Johnson, of course, President himself, Donald Trump. Let's go ahead and say his name. All endorsing of this. The deceased racist Charlie Kirk. He introduced Donald Trump to the Seven Mountains Mandate. Paula White McLean, Donald Trump's spiritual advisor. She's a part of this ideology. Lauren Boebert. She's a part of this. And this gets on and on, people. It just continues on. Media, ensuring news and media reflect evangelical perspectives. Now, we're going to be talking about the manosphere next here, but of course, the manosphere falls in this as well. And that's through the distorted view of red pill that's being presented. Because the whole capsule, should I say, the whole aspect of red pill exists around Christianity. The man is in charge. The man leads. You need to submit. All this type of nonsense that you get from the Bible is what the red pill perspective is built around. Now, what people fail to realize is that in the beginning, before the patriarchal perspective that we're now inundated with came to be, the world was matrilineal. Not just in Africa, but in multiple areas. The Americas, Europe, India, Asia. It was a matrilineal culture. But of course, once imperialism came to exist, all that was wiped out and it was replaced by the patriarchal culture that we know today. So we've grown up in a distortion, whereas people do not even realize that what we accept as normal never was. Different show. Arts and entertainment, creating cultural content that glorifies God rather than secular art. Does everybody remember when Jimmy Kimmel was taken off the air for a few days? Remember how the FCC got involved? When has the FCC ever gotten themselves involved in something such as that? This is that Christian takeover that I've been trying to tell people about for almost a year now, when I became aware of what was happening. But again, we're seeing that if we think about everything that has happened in government, picture this and understand that ideology exists throughout Seven Mountains Mandate. But everyone has forgotten the delivery system that was utilized to get this in front of us. We'll get to that in the next slide. Of course, religion, promoting a specific, often Pentecostal, charismatic form of Christian worship and doctrine. You've seen this, Turning Point USA. That is nothing more than a recruiting ground for far-right extremists, white conservative Christian nationalists. But you do have blacks who fall into this also. But how did that come to be? We go back to the implementation of the fictional character called Jesus. Remember I said this, through violence, malice, and the distinct tongue of a bullwhip. That will make damn near anybody a believer. And if the slaves were not taking to the lessons as they should, the pastor who was teaching would go get the slave master or go get the overseer, and more or less he would get their compliance and their understanding that way. Make no mistake, there was violence that was utilized to bring Africans into the mindset of accepting Christianity. Although, even though when they went to their slave quarters at night, they still practiced what little bit they remembered or still knew of their own religion, while during the daytime expressing their devotion to the master's religion. Family, promoting hypocritical traditional family structures and values. One of the new things now is that they're pushing for there should be no voting for any female family members, to the point where they're saying that only one person in the household should be able to vote. And that, of course, is going to be the male. This is going to be the father, aka the man, aka the head of the household, the leader. Now, I know everyone has got their own perspective. Oh, no, that's not traditional family, this, that. I'm not here to get into all that right now. I'm just letting you know specifically from the standpoint of what is happening as voting is going on at this point in time. Before you get out and vote, you need to understand what it is that you are voting against and what is being utilized against us. Last but not least, business or economics, promoting specified entrepreneurship and controlling economic structures. Does anybody remember when the Trump administration started clawing back money that was already allotted? Money for US aid, money for children's cancer research, money for Alzheimer's research, money for, for World AIDS research. Literally, the Trump administration had gotten involved to the point that money that was already supposed to be gone, that people were expecting, was pulled back. A lot of those folks never received the money that they expected. A lot of those folks are now in hard times. And the people who were benefiting from that, such as the AIDS patients who were getting money to help with the treatment or to develop new treatments, it was documented that a good portion has died since then. But you don't hear that in the news because it is not the focus. Again, if you have not been told, if you're not looking for it in particular, you don't give it any consideration. But all of this is happening. So how about, yes, everybody remembers how law firms were being squeezed for services. Any lawyer who happened to have prosecuted Trump, the DOJ went after that lawyer and the company or law firm that they were associated with. Remember how there were law firms that were saying that, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and pay $200 million to the Trump administration, but at the same time, we'll also make sure we'll give away a certain amount of hours. All right, so we're talking extortion. Now, when I listen to DEI, what was it? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. I look at it from the point of being division, extortion, and intimidation. That is what Trump's DEI was, although they tried to play this game of didn't earn it for the people who were in place prior to the purge that we saw 22 people who had lost regular elections that were made a part of the Trump administration. They were all losers, but they're the folks who are making policy. Although there's a few of them who have been dismissed as the administration is going through their normal routine of changes where they have to throw out 11 different people before they get the right match that still doesn't work. But anyway, getting back to it, the Seven Mountains Mandate. These are the areas that I want you all to go back after the show and give some consideration when you turn the news on next time. Look at who's behind the podium at government. Listen to what's being said about education. In Florida right now, if you recall, they shut it down back in 2021 or 2022, where they were trying to say that, oh, well, the slaves enjoyed being slaves. Matter of fact, they learned a good skill by being slaves. They learned good skills being slaves. Well, they are trying this again. Yes, in Florida, they are going through this act one more time where they are going to try and put it out here and have this revisionist history regarding slavery. But because of the redistricting issue that is going through right now, they're probably going to get away with it because blacks, and I'm putting this on us right now, we did not show up as we should because of adhering to the nonsense that we're going to be discussing here, right? So I think we've done enough. Let's go ahead and get off of this. All right, so I believe we've already done from Nicholas. We discussed the financing. We've already been through, been through Seven Mountains Mandate, but again, just to roll through one time, the core belief, dominionism, the belief that Christians should exercise dominion over every aspect of society. We just covered all seven of those. Cultural transformation, followers aim to replace secular or liberal values with a Christian consensus in these areas, and we know that is conservative. Now, they label this, oh, this is spiritual warfare. This is good against evil. But how is it that everything that we're seeing from them, I've just mentioned some of the things that fall under that, where they've attacked law firms. I forgot to mention that they attacked institutions of higher learning. Remember Harvard, Yale, all these folks are being squeezed saying that, well, if you don't adhere to these new policies that we're putting in place, you're not going to get your grant money. When was the government ever putting the screws to institutes of higher learning? Oh, well, you're not doing enough to protect Christians and Jews. I mean, just coming up with lines in order to find a way to withhold funding or force them in a position where they needed to provide money if they wanted to stay open. Again, spiritual warfare. The movement, heavily associated with the new apostolic reformation, often frames this endeavor as a spiritual battle to take back culture from demonic influence. Y'all. But you've got to have that angle that you have to present. And if you have anyone who's so encapsulated inside of this belief of Christianity, they will take it literally and they will believe till the end. They literally have their Christian warriors, all of them fed with lies. And they take this to heart as being actual truth. But it doesn't work unless you have somebody up front who's going to be able to spin that web, keep you trapped, and pull you along. So this is what we're going to end this particular segment on. Everybody remembers Project 2025, right? Project 2025 was that delivery system that allowed the Seven Mountains Mandate to infiltrate policy in the government. So the question that I asked, again, I always know the answer before I ask it, but I want to make sure that if no one else is familiar with it, I get you on board. Did Project 2025 secretly implement Seven Mountains Mandate ideology into the government? Based on analysis of its documents and proponents, Project 2025 is heavily influenced, I'll say again, heavily influenced by the Seven Mountains Mandate ideology, a framework often associated with Christian nationalism that seeks to place conservative Christians in control of seven key spheres of American society, including government. While the integration of these ideas into the policy proposals was not necessarily secret, as they were outlined in published documents, critics and researchers argue that the project serves as a vehicle to implement this dominionist theology by reordering the federal government. And that is what we're seeing right now. Everything that we've seen that has taken place since Donald Trump came back into office has been the Seven Mountains Mandate being implemented, albeit through the government. The Seven Mountains Mandate demands dominion over seven societal mountains. And we've already discussed that: family, religion, education, media, arts, entertainment, business, government. Project 2025's mandate for leadership acts as a roadmap to take over the government mountain to force change across the others. So there's really no need for me to go through this, being that we've already done so. But what I want you to understand, people, is that Project 2025, as you notice, is no longer being discussed. You do not hear that come across any type of news cycle nowadays, because it was so bad when people started realizing what was happening, that it's not just the brown and black folks being affected. It's us, Donald Trump, white MAGA consorting conservatives also. We've got issues with gas. We've got issues with beef. We've got issues with the economy. When it was when it was saying that it was not just people of color, then the eyes start opening and you're starting to get the apology to, oh, if I would have known. What do you mean if you would have known? You voted for this guy 3 times. The only reason that you know now is because you're suffering with everyone else. Miss me with that nonsense. So let's go ahead and close out of the Christianity portion, shall we? All right, so the Manosphere. So the first contact that I recall with this is Kevin Samuels. Now, granted, in the beginning, there were some points that Kevin was making that sounded about right, that did make sense. There were some points. Notice I said some points. And to anyone who's heard on one of the platforms of my fellow content creators, oh, you can't use some, it's either majority or minority. No, some is an unofficial unit of measurement that does explain things that need to be explained, if not the minority or the majority. Dare I even say a few. But again, I will say there were some points that Kevin made that made sense, but then there were others that were straight hood bonkers. I remember when I first heard the concept of a high value man, and then he put it in the phrase, a high value man doesn't cheat, he exercises options. That always sounded crazy to me. Then I thought about it, okay, a high value man doesn't ask permission. He cheats whether you like it or not. So there was always some type of grind that was added to it, some type of saying that was thrown in here to make it acceptable or to adhere around the concept. Now, one of the things I noticed with these Manosphere cats, and I've got plenty of associates who associate with them. I myself am not. Even though I've been on the panel, I've been around the groups for a couple of years now, I never once professed my inclusion with Manosphere ideology. I've taken notes, I've recognized, I've commented where I needed to, but in the end, I realized that This is something that is destructive, not just to society as well, but especially to the Black community. Once again, I recall Kevin Samuels talking about, hey, if you're going to express interest in a woman, guys, after 6 months, you should know whether or not that you want to be with her or you do not want to be with her. He always talked about intention, right? So therefore, when he was talking about intention, what was stated by him is that if you've been with, or excuse me, he said to women, if you've been with a guy for almost a year and a half, 2 years, and he still hasn't married you, he's not looking to get married. He's looking to probably maintain this long-term boyfriend girlfriend thing, but the guy's not looking for marriage, which makes sense. And he always used to saying, why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free? So again, I know content creators who are staunch defenders of staunch defenders of the manosphere. Oh, the man is the leader. You need to submit to him. You need to get on his program. Or I hear this nonsense from the pickup artists. Hey, you never get on her program. She gets on yours. The manosphere always seems to project accountability, but never seems to accept culpability. And especially when you start talking about pregnancy. Wherever there's a single mom, that means there's a single dad. Everybody should catch smoke, but no, it's always a focus on the female. But again, remember, as I said, there is ideology that has infiltrated our mindsets, whereas the matrilineal perspective has never been broached by anyone in the manosphere. If they hear it mentioned, oh, you lying, it'd never be like that. The man always leads. As I said before at the very beginning of the show, the world was matrilineal before the patriarchy came to be. Just the fact, nothing that I need to make up. But anyway, before we get too far off, let's go ahead and just zoom this back in here. If anything else comes up to mind, be sure I'll mention. Manosphere talking points tell Black men voting doesn't yield results. Now, this is the one thing that I always hear in that crowd. What's voting ever done for a Black man? What's voting ever done for Blacks, period? Well, if you actually engaged in it, maybe you would know. After the Civil War, the 15th Amendment, during the Reconstruction years, 13th, 14th, and 15th, which were all three considered the Reconstruction Amendments, the 15th provided us the right to vote. And over 80 years later, the excuse me, the 1965 Voting Rights Act codified that, gave us the ability to have our voice heard. And as of today, right now, this moment, it's been squandered, where the Voting Rights Act has been all but eviscerated. And why? Because we couldn't get anyone to go to the polls en masse. And why was that? Voting ain't ever done anything. It can't do nothing for us. But here, let me go ahead and explain this. Manosphere content creators, particularly within subsets targeting Black men, frequently argue that traditional voting does not yield tangible results, aiming to steer their audience away from democratic support and toward political apathy-driven non-voting, or conservative alternatives. These narratives capitalize on feelings of being economically strained and culturally overlooked, arguing that both political parties fail to address the specific needs of Black men. So this is where you get that, well, both sides are no good nonsense. As I told someone the other day, only one side has said that Black history is divisive, that Black history is racist, of all things, that Black history is revisionist. Only one side has done that. Only one side has criminalized the civil rights movement. Now, there are more than I can mention, but you get the point here, right? Only one side has been against everything that I'm speaking of. But funny enough, I see the same people who are out here saying that, oh yeah, civil rights, and we've got to make sure that we respect that. Dr. King, woo! And then these same Black folks wearing red hats turn around and vote for the same party that is stripping them of those very same rights. What type of ignorance is that? It is happening. So let's talk key talking points. The Democrats take black men for granted. Lack of tangible returns. Influencers argue that despite overwhelmingly supporting Democratic candidates, black men have not seen significant improvements in their economic status, education, or incarceration rates. Now, the crazy thing here is that they talk about incarceration rates, right? But yet, I sat here on some panels and watched where they have shown that incarceration rates of black men have gone down. So I can never understand. Wait a minute, you're sitting here saying that it's gone down, but as soon as someone says Democrat, and all of a sudden, yeah, look at the arrest rates, and everyone always wants to run back to the 1994 crime bill, to which the partakers of that, or who were part of that, Biden and Clinton, each expressed regret for that particular point in time where they made those statements and they pushed that bill through. But be that as it may, that's always a talking point to run to. But yet, as I said, I will sit on a panel or sat on a panel and watch the rates show that black incarceration had gone down. But if you mention anything about the Democratic Party, oh, it's sitting on the roof. Look how it got there. The second thing, not a monolith argument. The Black Manosphere, think fresh and fit, argues that black men are treated as a single uniform voting bloc rather than individuals, pushing the idea that breaking away from this groupthink is an act of empowerment. Again, all the right things to say to the wrong people who do not need to hear it, who then internalize it. There are three types of blacks that undermine the whole effort of what was done after the Civil War. I mean, literally undermined everything that we needed to try and make a change or sustain what was put in place. You have the woefully educated or miseducated. You have the religiously indoctrinated. And then, of course, you also have the culturally disconnected. And we'll be talking about those folks when we get to the FBA part. But those three always seem to be the main ones that keep tracking mud into the house. Or as I like to say, attempting to turn shit pie into red velvet cake. What's another talking point? Misread by leadership. Creators assert that the party fails to understand the end user, black men, resulting in flattened outreach that fails to resonate with younger, more cynical voters. But the problem here is that when we look at it, the folks who adhere and listen to the Manosphere are these young guys. They're the ones in between the ages, let's say, of 20, maybe 35, even some up to 40, who are experiencing financial strain of some sort, of poor relational skills, because a lot of them have grown up with some type of gadget in their hand. They have no real communication skills unless they're outside like, yeah, Rich, what you know about this? I'm him. I mean, this type of subcultural norm that has come to be out here. I always make the statement that when you have an unaccountable woman get with an unregulated man, you end up with unrestrained children. And that's what we're seeing here right now that is coming out here. Every day now, there's something that goes awry that we would consider to be outside of the law. Now, as Generation X, I tell people I come from a point in time where men were respected, women were virtuous, and children did not speak until spoken to. And that doesn't mean it was a bad thing. It simply means that there were barriers that were in place. There were standards, there were expectations of behavior that was not going to be tolerated by your mother or your father or anyone in the community. That doesn't exist anymore. I don't know if you guys remember my big brother Carver. He was on here a while back. It's been about a year or so since Carver sat down here. But we had a conversation about what was missing in society. We talked about Big Mama and Big Daddy, because that's what it was in Black culture, where you had that patriarch and that matriarch that no one ran their mouth with when they said enough. They're not here anymore. Nowadays, you would have the supposed matriarch, Big Mama, who's out in the club with her daughter. Or if she's not out there with her daughter, she's out on her own. Look, Big Daddy, he's not here with his kids as you would expect. No, he's still out in the streets living his best life. He's still active. Both of them with offspring, and 9 times out of 10 who have children might be married, might not be married, maybe in a long term dating situation, but nonetheless, the people that used to be the big daddy and big mama culture we depended on to keep things straight, they're not here anymore. That's just where we are, people. But anyway, the biggest thing about the manosphere, the system is rigged against men. Now, I was telling my big brother the other night when Carver and I had the opportunity to speak. I told him that when I first heard some of the manosphere stuff starting to rub me the wrong way, one of the things that really pissed me off was listening to this nonsense about men's rights. I'm like, are you kidding me? Men's rights? There's nothing restricting any man in America, must, or should I say, let alone a white male conservative. Not a thing. But men in general, no, there's nothing pressing us. I mean, think about this. There is no man that has been stopped from um, putting military troops in the streets, sending military troops to foreign nations to kidnap sovereign leaders, or sovereign presidents of sovereign countries, sending men out into international waters, blowing up boats, starting wars with sovereign nations that did not need to be started. There is no woman who has a hand in that. But again, this is that it's all woman's fault thing that you get from the manosphere, that again is closely aligned with Christianity. And remember the 7 spheres that we talked about? And I said media and I said red pill. The manosphere through red pill is one of those 7 areas. And that 7 area, one of the areas, excuse me, was media. Again, take this all into what I'm saying, folks. Prioritizing feminism over men's issues. A major tenet is that the political system, particularly in the US, has been captured by feminist and liberal agendas that disadvantage men. Again, you just heard me mention all the things that it's a damn lie. The manosphere, when it began, was a white thing. It was white male conservative victimhood. But then you had the black manosphere that came along, which is nothing more than white male conservative victimhood in blackface. And I say that 10 toes down. Now, you can't have a conversation with these guys actually get any points to be made because it's had enough time in it being the manosphere culture to fester. So whereas a liberal perspective like myself, if I try to have a conversation with it, it's pointless because I realize that I'm talking to culturally disconnected, woefully miseducated, and religiously indoctrinated individuals. Mark Twain had a saying, never get into an argument with an idiot because they will pull you in, drag you down, and beat you with experience. And that is a true thing. But if I have to have a dust up from time to time, then we go ahead and go in it. Now, I don't always look to have any type of success in this because, again, I'm in their area. Whereas if it doesn't adhere to the manosphere topics or principles, then it's a lie. But again, that is that lie that has put us where we are right now, looking at the fact that Roland Martin said a year ago, even a few years out, that they were gunning for the Voting Rights Act. If they can get to the Voting Rights Act and have the ability to change how we vote, then they've all but more or less secured the country. For decades, at least, that's what the proponent was. There still might be a chance, but that's if we can break folks free of this foolery. What's next here? Attributing failure to wokeness. The discourse argues that focusing on wokeness and gender equality has come at the expense of men's rights and economic prosperity. If there's a lack of economic prosperity, it's everything that the current president has done, and that folks who have allowed him, or should I say, have enabled him to participate in. So we can't talk about the lack of economic prosperity. We know how that happened. Men's rights, again, give me a break. If there's any rights that I speak of for men's, it will be fathers' rights. Now, that is one that I can say that, yes, I have seen for myself, as many others have as well, to whereas an unaccountable woman, not notice, I'm not saying all women, but if you run into an unaccountable woman, she will play the court system and prevent that man from seeing his child. Now, I've seen guys go from being in a nice, comfortable 4-bedroom house to living in maybe a 1 or 2 bedroom shack where all his money goes to pay for child support, alimony. Heck, some guys get stuck with alimony or alimony, child support. Everything they have now is gone. His credit rating is through. While she's in the house, she's comfortable, and at times, no, she may take on another male, another gentleman caller. All the while, this guy's over here suffering. Now, that's not always the case because we do know that there are some men who need to be out of that house as well. It goes both ways. But like I said, there's culpability that needs to be assessed. But still, this men's rights shit, forget my language, absolutely not. Men are not suffering per se. I would say that fathers will suffer before all men. So if I were to be for anything, it would be for the rights of fathers who truly are going through. But absolutely no, I would never support this nonsense of men's rights. No. All right, so there's a little bit more here to it. But as I said before, this is supposed to be a short show, so we'll just go ahead and get on with it. But understand here that the manosphere is a detriment, and these are some of the points that illustrate that. Now, moving on here. Now, remember I talked about this whole issue of accountability being projected without giving any consideration to culpability. So I asked or stated, the manosphere projects only the accountability of women while excluding the culpability of men. The manosphere, of course, the network of online communities, often focuses on female accountability while minimizing or omitting male culpability. It promotes a narrative that feminism has harmed men, fostering misogyny and blaming women for societal issues. This perspective portrays men as victims and emphasizes male dominance, often reinforcing traditional gender roles. Now, I had an opportunity to swing through on TikTok about a week or so ago, actually 2 weeks ago, just for shits and giggles, and I saw that there was a trad wife channel. Trad wife meaning traditional wife. Now, these gals are nothing more than junkyard dogs off their leashes. Yes, God damn it, forgive my language, but I said that. I'm talking about if you were to look at the men as being pissant aggressors, these gals were, what's a good way to put it? Just rowdy submissives. I'm just trying to be nice as I can here, right? Because I'm sure that you guys may watch it for the kids, who knows? But nonetheless, you've got these junkyard dog submissive behaving females. And they talk about single women being ratchety in their mouths, just flying. I was sitting in this room and myself and another guy, we got called, you effeminate, effing, weak ass men, learn to be leaders. And I'm listening to this like, okay, she's got all this smoke from a distance. One of the things that I also talk about here, and then you will hear this occasionally from these manosphere dudes who will talk about single women and say that you guys seem to let your mouths get the best of you. You talk crazy in a man's face, not recognizing that with men, we recognize there's always a low-level possibility of violence. Yes, there is. So therefore, we taper ourselves. But when you talk to a woman who will get in a man's face, facing what you gonna do, what you gonna do, and I'm listening to this come from a woman who said that she was a wife. But because I was not her husband, she felt she could talk to me any way she wanted to. So again, there's this contradiction with this ideology. You've got these pissant aggressive dudes, and you've got these just rumbling junkyard dog submissive women, and together they support this ideology that, oh yes, I should be home. He should never have to cook. Oh, my job is to clean the house. As I said before, all of this centers around that Christian ideology. There was a Manosphere movie that came out here recently, and I had a chance to watch it on Netflix. And one of the things that really looked foolish was the fact that some of these women were accepting of their husband having girlfriends. And the guy proudly says, oh, we have a one-way marriage. I provide, I go out, I do what I do because I'm the man. I take care of things. And the woman's job was, she takes care of home. And she knows that I may go out, hey, I want to go see my girl. And one guy had the audacity to say that, I may bring my girlfriend home and then myself, her, and my wife, we all may three have sex together. Now, notice by looking at the wife, she wasn't cool with it. You can see it in her eyes. But again, this guy is a millionaire. She's got a comfortable life. They have a couple of kids. And all she has to do is sacrifice her integrity. And she's got a good life. This goes back to that thing that Kevin Samuels talked about of high value men don't cheat. They have options. No, high value, high value men don't ask. They just do. So on one of my shows, I asked the question to the ladies, hey, would you rather spend your time with a supposed high value man and be his one of many? Or will you look at a guy who's going to be right to you, may not be the richest guy in the world, but he can take care of himself. His bills are paid. He's not struggling. Would you rather be this guy's one of many or be this dude's one of one? Well, again, the age group that we're dealing with, you would be surprised how many girls still said they would take the other guy because he had money to get them set up. That is where we are as far as a value system, folks. Value has no worth unless it's agreed upon, because in the end, you get what you qualify for. So when you would listen to some of the ladies talk about, oh, no, I'm not doing such, this ain't happening. Or even some of the guys talking about, yeah, man, she can't work like this so she can get on my page. I looked at it from a perspective of people get the partner they qualify for and not the one they feel they are entitled to. Everyone has this idea of that perfect person, of who they think they should get in their lives, who they should share their lives with. Hey, that's who I need to be with. But the thing is that you can't like anyone who doesn't like you back. That's the simple principle. Like who likes you back. Of course, we all like to punch out with our weight zone, our weight class every now and then. And maybe, often not, some of us will get lucky and pull something in a little bit higher than we'd expect to get. But overall, again, you get who you qualify for. That sounds rather harsh, but no, that's pretty much it. Love who loves you back, like who likes you back. Understand, again, value has no worth unless it's agreed upon, which is still a better way or a nice way of saying you get who you qualify for. Because at times, not the person you feel you're entitled to is not going to work out. Work within. So we have the issues of accountability. Manosphere often frames women as manipulators, blaming them for issues while disregarding or excusing male behavior. One of the things that I used to get into it with folks a lot, and I remember one particular time on a panel, there was this conversation going around saying that if unprotected sex occurs, then abortion is the outcome. I'd say, oh, no, you don't. I remember a brother who called himself Gunny and I got into it about this. I said, unprotected sex does not lead to abortion. Unprotected sex leads to pregnancy. And still at that point, there's time for decisions to be made. And as I said, I'm pro-choice, but not to the point to whereas abortion is used as birth control. Absolutely not. But still, getting back to the topic of how that conversation between Gunny and I came to be, Gunny was trying to say that unprotected sex leads to abortion. No, it does not. But again, that is another one of the talking points that you hear pushed. And unless anyone is there to push back on that, a lot of this will get out into the ether and stay. Uh, Targeting young men. The content is aimed at young men and boys searching for identity using algorithms to amplify outrage. Absolutely. As I was saying a little bit earlier, majority of people that I saw who are always enraged or angry, talking about, look what women have done to us, look at the family, look, it was always young men between 20 and 35, or even 40. Now I call them young men because I'll be 56 next month. So as a 56-year-old black man who's got, my comfortable house, I've got my fleet of cars outside, I've got a job that has kept me in six figures for the last 14 to 15 years. I need to do more investing, definitely, but I don't have those strengths. I will say that at this point in time, yeah, I won't lie. It gets lonely. You like companionship. However, the well is tainted. Now, I'm not going to say that I agree with all this Manosphere stuff because I absolutely do not. Because the one thing that I never hear people talk about, value being one, and the other is choice. We do have a choice on who we look to pursue. Men chase, but women choose. However, if you are of interest to her, she can be persuaded. And how do you do that? Well, it all starts with your physical presence. Sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. The five basic senses is what we have to focus on. Now, granted, if a guy is 4'8", this is just not going to work for a girl who is already 5'3" or 5'4" and wants a guy to be at least 6 feet, 6'2", 6'4", all this type of nonsense. So there has to be some type of boundary or parameter set that keeps you in the house. I tell guys, hey, if you're at least 5'10", you're all right. You're damn near safe. 5'10" to 6 feet, you're in that comfortable middle zone. 6'1" and up, hey, that's payday for a lot of guys. But still, the thing is that you have to understand that there's got to be an area that you have to work from of reality and being realistic. But these guys that I see here that are always complaining are generally within that frame who are going through some type of financial strain. It's hard to make the ends meet. Trying to keep a job in the economy, especially right now. And then, of course, you've got women influencers who are always talking this level up game. You don't want a guy who makes $50,000. He can't do anything for you. You need to get that man who makes 6 figures or better. That's what you want. You want your life to be good. But 9 times out of 10, looking at the other side of the coin here, the girls who are looking for these men who are making 100,000, they aren't making that type of money. So you're talking about a guy not making a lot of cash, but he's a male. His value is not looked at the same. Female, if she's pretty, she'll be able to have a relative amount of success in what's going on, just upon appearance alone, because men value looks, value health, value beauty, all this type of stuff. But as I said before, there's a culpability. All right, there's culpability, there's responsibility that both people need to adhere to. But you don't get that 9 times out of 10 with the Manosphere philosophy. Now, going on here, I'll do one more thing here, and then we need to go ahead and get on here because I just realized what time it is. So the rhetoric of victimhood portrays men as victims of social change, arguing that progress for women is a loss for men. Again, a lie. Absolutely not. I have not seen any man suffering in this economy right now who has not been in a position of authority, or at least has got a level of education for himself, is comfortable, no, he's making it. All right, men are not suffering the way that they make it out to be. All right, it's just more or less misogyny and victimized behavior. Nothing kills me more when I hear them say, oh, why don't you just stop being a victim? Okay, how about you stop being a victimizer? If you're not a victimizer, you don't have victims, right? Right. All right, moving on. The Manosphere message resonates with men experiencing financial instability and failed experience with the opposite sex. Now, we've just talked about this, so we probably don't have to spend too much time here in this slide, but let's look at some certain things here. We talked about the resonating facts here. The content targets men feeling marginalized by economic inequality, particularly younger men struggling with housing, career, or status. Again, I've just mentioned that. Failed relationships. It offers a transactional view of dating, providing a sense of control for those with negative experiences with women. So you get a whole bunch of, again, victims. Now, notice they're not going to call their dudes victims. No. But you get all these guys who feel that they've been victimized by women who don't want to date them. They all band together. And now they find this type of content that more or less reinvigorates them and puts them to a mind frame like, yeah, they're the problem. Not the fact that I have not gone to school to better myself, that I haven't gotten a job to take care of myself. Everything is out the window, is always on the female. Then, of course, we'll skip down here to the alpha personality. Andrew Tate was one of the worst I could think of at the time. If it wasn't the, oh, I'm the man, the leader, and you're a poor man, you've not gone, this nonsense just sparking off. But then you have guys like Jay Wall. Yeah, I made sure, I was making money, I own a company, and I tell a woman, look, I can take you to Dubai. No, I can take you and your mom to Dubai. You take your whole family, but you understand something. If I'm putting this down, you need to understand that you are only available to me. Even though he may be kicking it with other women. This is probably before he got married, but this was that type of mindset. We had two type of alpha males, the one that would scream and the other one that would exude his authority based upon how he was construed to be attractive, to be powerful, to be influential, and use that to his perspective. Or should I say to his ability? All right, so the last thing I think I'll mention here, I think I already talked about that. This in regards to the relationships. Kevin Samuel said that if a man was dating a woman for more than 2 years, this man wasn't serious about marriage because he was getting the milk for free. Yes, and we've already talked about it. Yes, that statement aligns with the philosophy popularized by Kevin Samuels, who frequently argued that men know within 6 months to a year if they want to marry someone. He maintained that if a man waits longer than 2 years without a marriage proposal, he is likely not serious as he is receiving the benefits of their wife without commitment. Again, here's another tab we don't have to spend a lot of time on. Straight to the point. Just as I stated, just as he stated. So the next time you see a male influencing, manosphere supporting dude who's got kids with a woman that he's been dating for more than 2 years, ask him, so man, when you get married? Listen to what comes back. Guarantee you there's going to be some type of excuse that comes back. Trust me on this. They will sidestep their own ideology in order to be right. All right, let's scoot it on. Almost an hour and a half, which is not bad for me. Generally, I'm running around 2.5 hours or so before I get halfway through my slides here, but we're doing good right here, so let's go ahead and keep pace. All right, so we're going to just start landing our plane here. We're going to start coming down out of the clouds and talk about this level of black ashray here that I've been dealing with on social media here for the last week or two specifically. Foundation of Black Americans, FBA. Again, this movement is absolute foolishness. We've got black folks who seem to be proud to be able to say that I can trace my lineage back to slavery. All right, a time where there was violence, there was disenfranchisement, there was disparagement, there was basic human dignity stripped from us that these guys treat as if it's some type of medal of honor or some type of shield of virtue. I can trace my lineage back to slavery. Well, guess what, Hoss? The problem here is that you believe in that because you can trace your lineage back to slavery, that only you are entitled to reparations is completely blown. We'll get to that in a moment. But understand something. There was never anyone in the history of slavery that identified as FBA who ever worked on a damn plantation. Beat it with this nonsense. The foundation of Black American movement, which focuses on reparations for descendants of U.S. chattel slavery, has been described by some critics as adopting approaches that are anti-intellectual or divisive due to their narrow anti-immigrant and occasionally conspiratorial nature. Now, where does this come from? I asked the question or I made a statement. Foundation of Black American anti-intelligence is recognized in their approach to reparations. Yes. Proponents of FBA ideology often define the group based on strict lineage, arguing, that reparations should be exclusively for those whose ancestors were enslaved in the United States. I got something for that. Critics, however, argue that this approach mimics exclusionary tactics. Some critics suggest the FBA, along with similar movements like ADOS, American Descendants of Slaves, adopt strategies reminiscent of white nationalist or nativist frameworks targeting African immigrants and other Black populations rather than focusing on broad systemic change. That's generally what we do here, or should I say what they do. They do not focus on the we aspect, which is the overall diaspora. Immigrants from Africa, from Haiti, from Jamaica, from Brazil. Now, all these folks for FBA are coming in stealing jobs, lowering the wages, making it hard for the economy to survive because they're coming in getting all these free benefits. Who does that sound like? Who does that sound like? Now imagine someone looking like me disparaging someone who looks like me with this type of rhetoric. It's intellectually dishonest. The argument that only descendants of U.S. slaves deserve reparations is sometimes criticized for being detached from political reality and built on complete ignorance or a flagrant untruth about the history of Black solidarity. I mean, it's just a complete act of ignorance, considering that the person, whether he likes it or not, Tariq Nasheed, yes, you are the lead, you are the head, you are the leader of this nonsense. And the reason why the concept of what you're hearing is so nonsensical is because the leader, the head person who coined this mess, is a high school dropout who never furthered anything regarding logic. Therefore, that's why it's so damn stupid when you listen to foundational Black American ideology. We are a lineage. No, you're not. You're a distorted, self-tethered, mentacidal, ignorant tail cult. That is what foundational Black Americans are. Anti-intellectuals who go full throttle on the ignorance and really believe that Jesse Jackson coined the phrase African American. I've had 8 or 4 different conversations inside of a week, and they all said it was Jesse Jackson who brought African American to prominence, not realize that he did not coin this phrase. African American was a phrase that was used back in 1782 in a pamphlet that was talking about the capture of Lord Cornwallis, somewhere along those lines. And it was a Black man who was responsible for writing that, to which someone white had stated that it was an African American who had created that pamphlet. Again, they get all their information from the internet and they get it from other anti-intellectuals. Now, funny enough, you do have some folks who are actual doctors who subscribe to this FBA ideology. It makes no damn sense. None whatsoever. How are you going to have a degree that focuses on showing that you have mastered higher learning, but yet you get yourself involved in ideology that says that, oh, Black people are indigenous to North America? When you look at the equatorial climates, the zones, the tropical rainforest zone, and you can see America sitting up here, Africa sitting lower, right in that equatorial zone, where you have more UV rays that are hitting the continent. Therefore, you have more melanation, that occurs. And as a result, if you would look at these pictures, you do not have that same level of melanation in North America that you find in Africa. Therefore, it is scientifically impossible for blacks to have been indigenous to North America. I'll make sure that I share that particular clip here. It's on TikTok that I did this. But you have folks arguing with that type of science because my grandmama said that I'm indigenous because we got Indian in our family. What? Let's go ahead and get to that here. But again, uh, absolute morons. Yeah, I said foolery to its highest order. Now, the thing that tickles me the most, and I said I was going to bring this back up, when you listen to them talk about, well, only people who can trace their lineage back to slavery should be the ones entitled to reparations. That means that no one from Africa, from Haiti, no, if you were not here, if your family was not here during the time of slavery, you're not entitled. Again, this is some of that ignorant, anti-intellectual Tariq Nasheed bullshit, part of my language, that has affected this whole cult. Because what these guys do not realize is that from the very beginning of Africans coming into the Western Hemisphere, starting with the Spanish colonies down south, including the failed colonies that came to America, I want to say 1526, the Guadalupe. I can't remember the full name here, but in that particular failed colony, 110 slaves revolted. And as a result of also famine, poor management, disease, the Spanish said, you ninjas can stay here. We're not taking you back. Not that they wanted to go back, but these blacks then mixed into the local populace and came across the local Indian population, which would account for this black people are indigenous to America nonsense. The slaves who were slaves when they were brought to America by the Spanish colonies had a fair amount of freedom now that was at their disposal, having been abandoned. But there were also blacks or Africans who came to the New World as explorers. Some even went Spanish explorers, even from the Spanish colonies, who were free. So you did have that mixture as well. But for the most part, just focusing on this blacks being indigenous to North America, no, absolutely not. But you did have blacks who mixed in with the local Indian populace. Thus, you had your black Indians. You're welcome. But as I was saying, getting back on track, slavery has been going on from the start of the time that Africans came from, again, the southern colonies, Haiti, Jamaica, Brazil, the Caribbean. And when they were brought to America, there were still slaves that were coming in. Even after slavery had been abolished and said that, hey, we're done, around 1807, where slavery was supposedly abolished, slave ships were still smuggling Africans in. So this blows up FBA's entire argument because slaves from Africa never stopped coming. See, this is what happens when you don't read. Plus, right here, July 9th, 1860, the last boat of smuggled slaves came to the United States right at the beginning of the Civil War, meaning that we had Africans at the beginning and on the backside of slavery in America. So there's no way to include also in the middle, as I was saying, because it never stopped. There is no pure plantation, or at least pure element of second and third and fourth generation descendants of slaves only. No, absolutely not. Yes, there were second, third, and fourth generations from the original Africans, but as I'm telling you right now, the slave trade never stopped. Even though it was outlawed, you still had people having slaves come in because remember I said it was profitable. So there's no way anyone can try and say that reparations are only for people who can trace this lineage back to slavery, provided that they were born in America. Our heritage did not begin with slavery. But if you listen to these foundational Black American idiots, they will believe so. Tuning in. The arrival of the Clotilda, July 9th, 1860, in Mobile, Alabama, makes it impossible for the foundation of Black Americans to say that only slaves born in America are entitled to reparations. The 1860 arrival of the Clotilda in Mobile, Alabama, with 110 enslaved Africans, highlights that slavery and its damages continued via illegal trafficking decades after the 1808 ban. I'm sorry, in some places it says 1807, some 1808, but still we're within that region, within that time frame. Strengthening arguments that reparations should include descendants of all enslaved people in the U.S., regardless of where their ancestors were born. So that's pretty much the point that I wanted to make here. I mean, other than still, there's information about the Clotilda itself in an African town that was created based upon those last Africans who came in and then had descendants who lived well into the 1920s, 30s, and some maybe up to 1940. But just understand here that the FBA argument is blown to bits with this information that you never hear discussed. And rest assured, if you see me around the block and TikTok anywhere, I'm going to make sure this is known. There is no way to guarantee that only FBA gets reparations. Number one, because no one ever identified in history as being FBA. Number two, FBA has no history. They have no legacy. They have no icons. Any and everything that the FBA thinks that they have is nothing more than what they have stolen by self-tethering themselves to the backs of African Americans with distinctions, the ones who actually have shown prominence and are recognized in history. The Booker T. Washingtons, the Thurgood Marshalls, the Shirley Chisholms, the Malcolm X's, the Martin Luther Kings. These type of individuals who are already recognized in history as African Americans of distinction that FBA will routinely try and say are FBA icons. No, they are not. Get on with your self-tethered asses. And it looks like I jumped the gun here, but oh well, so be it. Take note, as I said here, Africans were still brought to America after the slave trade was abolished in 1807. Yes, Africans were still brought to the United States after the 1807 Act, effective January 1st, 1808, banned the international slave trade. Despite being illegal, smuggling continued due to high demand and profit, with illegal trafficking persisting for decades, particularly in the 1810s and 1850s through smuggled ships and lax enforcement. So that alone, right there, how can you sit here and say, well, if you can't trace your lineage back to a slave, you don't get reparations. If you can, you have to have family that was in America and were slaves in America. They can't be born outside of any place. Well, here we're seeing right now for almost about 30 or 40 years, that Africans were still being brought in to the country. So therefore, you can't possibly claim to have a clean slate to say that, yeah, well, my family is strictly born in America. There are no Africans that were enslaved in this time frame. They were all foundation of Black America. No, they were not. As of right now, Africans were coming at the beginning of slavery, in the middle of slavery, and the end of slavery. So there's no way for this nonsense to say that only people who can trace their lineage back to slavery, who had ancestors born in America, are entitled to reparations. No, I have made the statement that if reparations were to be given, it doesn't start in America because we were the last one. Or should I say America was the last continent to get slaves. It would not start in Brazil. It would not start in Haiti, Jamaica, anywhere in the Caribbean. No, if reparations were to be given, it should start in Africa because that's where the crime was committed. And I know a lot of folks are not going to rock with that, but I'm okay with it because this is not about what makes them feel good. This is about if we were to get it right, that's where it would start. Reparations would begin on the African continent because you have people over there who can do the exact same thing they do, is trace their lineage right to the beach when family members were kidnapped and stolen. Keep that in mind. Now, this last bit was something that I wanted to put up here that I came across that I need to do a show on exclusively. Diving with a purpose. Now, these are people who actually will take the time to dive and go out and look for these shipwrecks. Now, if I forgot to mention the last boat that came into Mobile, Alabama, as soon as the slaves were offboarded, they burned the ship and sunk it so they could hide the evidence of the illegal trafficking of slaves. So what they do at Diving with a Purpose is that they go looking around the world for these sunken slave ships so they can make sure that they are part of history. So that people do not know this, they will know and recognize that yes, there were slave ships that actually left Africa. I think I mentioned before you have some FBA and some folks just on the outskirts of common sense who say that, well, not a single slave ship ever left Africa. How do we get here? Oh, that's because we were indigenous. Oh, shut the. Oh, like black person, please. Anyway, Diving with a Purpose and the Slave Wrecks Project are leading efforts to locate, document, and preserve sunken slave ships, transforming underwater archaeology into a quest for African diasporic history. These teams, often composed of black divers, explore the ocean floor to honor the estimated 1.8 million Africans who died during the Middle Passage, uncovering stories from nearly 1,000 slave ships believed to have been wrecked. And of course, there's a video here for you to take on and also look further through. I'll scroll just in case I have folks who are too timid and lazy to go do this on their own, right? Still, Diving with a Purpose is what they call it. All right, so what we're going to do is this last one. Let me go ahead and stop the music. Hopefully it hasn't been too loud or hasn't been playing over itself. So with that being said, here's one thing that I want to do. Let me do this real fast. Let me just take this out and come back in. Share screen. Let me just share this one tab. I want the sound. All right. So apparently, remember when I said that Tariq Nasheed is the leader of the head? Tariq likes to play this game that, oh, there's no head, there's no lead. So what is it? Just some floating body of bullshit claiming to have lineage that you don't truly have? Stealing or acquiring history that no one in your movement has ever worked on? Really? But this is just a scant clip of where apparently she called him the leader. And he's like, well, wait, what? You on this old stuff? What are you talking about? All right, so let me know if you can hear this. Not all right. Fair use, fair use.
Did she say there's the leader? Did you say that, Youtho?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, sweetie. Yeah, you still stuck back in 2010. A lot of y'all foreigners, y'all
You go to
are
Senegal.
never up to date. Y'all harp on things that's way outdated. You still regurgitating outdated, debunked nonsense. Nobody's believing that leader FBA group stuff. The world has moved on. We are a lineage. People are recognizing our lineage. The lineage is being respected. Major news stories are about our lineage. So whining and lying about that is not going to change anything. Did she say there's the leader? Did you say that?
I hope you were able to hear that. But again, Tariq is trying to say, oh, there's no leader. You guys are harping on 2010 stuff. No, she was right. Someone has got to lead the nonsense. And it was his idea. It was his baby. All right. It was his concept of FBA that was released into the ether. Tariq Nasheed never finished high school. Right. So funny enough, when you have this conversation about Dr. John Henry Clark, it's one of the next shows I need to do, showing the folks who have championed information about Africa. John Henrik Clark, Dr. Joseph Binyakini, Dr. John D. Jackson, Chancellor Williams, there's numerous others here to put in here into the conversation of who's done work. Ashra Kwesi, another name, folks who have done work to bring the history of Africa out into the public light that scientific racism has pushed aside. Things that Tariq Nasheed may have some knowledge of, to which there's himself and other FBAers who are attempting to create this fusion between FBA and Pan-Africanism. And there's no way that it can work, because Pan-Africanism looks at the diaspora as a whole coming together to unify, whereas the FBA ideology, as you can hear in this little clip, they strike at and disparage any Black immigrants that is in America because of the fear that, well, you're just trying to act Black and live the Black experience, but when it gets down to it, you're going to run away. You're not trying to be Black. You just want to pretend to be Black. Besides, you aren't entitled to reparations. Well, you know what? Yes, they are. Because as I just showed you, slaves have been coming in since the beginning of slavery, during the middle portion of slavery in America, and towards the end when the Civil War started. There's always been immigrants in America, which means that reparations are due to anyone who was enslaved in America, not just this FBA nonsense. All right, an hour, 47 minutes. I don't think I've ever gotten done this soon, but damn, it's almost 2 o'clock in the morning, so I'm going to be hurting for work. But you know what? As I've said before, the information has got to get out here because not enough of this is done. So again, the topic for tonight was Black culture's 3 detriments: Christianity, the Manosphere, and FBA. Now, rest assured, there's going to be more information about this coming up. I guarantee. So that being said, I think there's enough that we've done here. So all I can do now pretty much is finish out like we normally do. So I'd like to thank anyone who stuck around to see this. Hey, again, as always, Replay Gang, make sure you check it out. Get this out to people that you know as well. Last but not least, find somebody who knows somebody to tell somebody about what's going on over here. If you like it, let me know. Share it if you do. And subscribe if this is what you're looking for. Thanks for checking me out. I'll see you next time. I'm out.